Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Sinicropi. Welcome back to another episode of Wellness at the Speed of Light show. We are obviously in a completely different setting today. We are here in beautiful LA, and I could not be more excited about who we have in studio and what the topic is. I have Dr. Neil Riordan, who I had an opportunity to connect with after going through his incredible books. We'll talk about those later. He is a pioneer in the world of stem cells and regenerative medicine, something I've become ridiculously passionate about. I think it has the potential to help millions of people. We are in a bad place right now when it comes to chronic disease, misinformation, poor education as far as what patients' understanding is of what's available. And I think that we could not have a better guest today to cut through the noise of what stem cell therapies are, what is the misinformation out there, the potential for stem cell therapies, the incredible research that he's done. I mean, I'm thinking like 70 plus papers, so many patents, collaborations. He was on the Joe Rogan show with Mel Gibson, talking about Mel Gibson and his dad. I know he's way more excited about this podcast today than he was about the Joe Rogan podcast. So I really appreciate that. So on that note, welcome to the show today. Thank you. I could not be more appreciative of you coming
Well,
by
thanks
today.
for having me. When we met on the phone, I don't know how, I don't remember how long we talked, but it went way over whatever was scheduled. And I really enjoyed talking to you and, your background being, coming straight out of allopathic medicine and
Mhm.
then realizing that there are some other things that might be able to do to help your patients. It's really fun to talk to docs that have been through the wars and now are on the other side and are able to look at other things other than just pure allopathic medicine. I think it's going to be allopathic medicine, but right now it's still sort of on the outside. And my entire career, I've been a little bit ahead of the curve
Mhm.
on certain things, and this is no different. And but I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate you doing the podcast, and look forward to it.
I couldn't be more excited. It's interesting because you say that you think it's going to be part of allopathic medicine. Okay, I think it should be part of allopathic medicine today. Again, nothing that we're talking about today is medical advice. Talk to your own providers or give us a call if you want to talk more about stem cells. But I think it should be part of. And there's a lot of blockades to that. But I don't know if you ever follow the betting markets, like that poly market, the
Oh, right.
betting.
Yeah.
So I will just tell you, if knowledgeable folk, people that are in the world of regenerative medicine and stem cells, I think it'd be a 99.9% chance that stem cells are, if that was one of the things, like when they do the presidential elections or whether or not somebody's going to get fired from some government position. It's actually pretty cool. It's
Yeah.
very interesting, actually, the poly market stuff. But I think it'd be 9% that it is going to be part of just standard medical care when we get over the hurdles that we're going to talk about today as kind of we get through this. I want to start by just asking. It's going to be really broad because this is something that bothers me. Why did the word stem cells become a dirty word? I don't know if you remember George Carlin. He had his list of dirty
Oh,
words.
right.
How did stem cells get on George Carlin's list of dirty words? Like, seriously.
Well, it goes back to the history of the original stem cells that everybody's talking about were embryonic. There was an entire religious, ethical
Mm.
argument about that. And I just talked to a guy the other day. I'm speaking at a conference next in 2 weeks. He invited me to the conference, and he said, "Well, do you still get those things from, abortions or from embryos?" I'm like, "Bro, I've never have." So I mean, this is a guy who's a well-read person, who's putting together a big serious event. He still thinks stem cells are a dirty word. I have people on airplanes. You're talking, what do you do? Blah blah blah. Stem cells, and then they'll, I'm for that. But for under hushed, whispered tones, that entire game is over with. It's been shown that there's no way they're going to be of any value. But that was pharma's model. because you can take an embryonic cell and grow it forever
Hmm.
and make enough drug to treat the entire planet from one source. But those cells just don't work. And we wrote a paper about this maybe 10, 12 years ago when the Geron went out of business. The king is dead, long live the king. And at the end of embryonic stem cell research, because they just completely failed. And that's for a variety of reasons, but the main thing is just too far away from nature. I
Right.
don't, when I was a kid, we had this advertisement for seed oils, basically for butter. I can't believe it's not butter, and it's
Yes.
not nice to mess with Mother Nature.
Uh,
Lightning bolt comes out. I try not to mess with Mother Nature, and that embryonic stem cell stuff. You're messing with Mother Nature tremendously. You're taking a cell that wants to become a baby, and you're growing it, basically forever, and then trying to turn it into something else. We don't do any of that. The cells that we have always worked with they either come from the patient. So we were the first in the world to treat a person using their own fat stem cells.
mhm.
We did a series of patients with rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis using their fat derived stem cells. We've used bone marrow extensively, particularly for orthopedics and
Mhm.
particularly younger patients. Predominantly, we've always used the umbilical cord tissue. The baby's born and it's still connected to mom by the
Mhm.
umbilical cord. It's tied off and cut, and the baby's taken away, and then mom delivers the rest, which is the placenta and the umbilical cord. And that's what we use as a starting source for our stem cells. And they're kind of day zero cells, but they come from a baby that's already become a baby. It's the tissue that's being thrown away from the creation of a baby. And that's where our cells come from. And they don't form tumors. They have tremendous capacity to still
Really. Yep.
grow. They have tremendous capacity to secrete things that will stimulate
Mhm.
repair, that will decrease inflammation, that can help the immune system normalize. Those cells do all those things automatically without messing with Mother Nature at all. And that's what we use. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and there's been a shift probably between 15 and 17, where the Catholic Church actually
Right.
started
Yep.
funding adult stem cell research. And these are umbilical cord. So anything after a baby is born is,
Hmm.
unfortunately, there's this classification of adult. Even though these aren't adult, they are postnatal. So after the baby was born. So that's all in one lump. I think we should have a postnatal category, but doesn't matter. Everybody says adult stem cells. So they're not from a fetus.
Right.
Nobody's
Hmm.
died. A potential life is not being taken from an embryo. That's where the dirty word comes from, that, oh, you're basically aborting a fetus, or you're doing something with an embryo that could have become alive. We've never done any of that. We just use adult stem cells. And we tried to get a stem cell law passed in Texas in 2015. We couldn't get past committee because there was still that thought process that there's something bad about this. And so we did a lot of lobbying, not
Hmm.
not hiring lobbyists, but we just went to the Capitol, and we said, we'd like to take you guys out to lunch. We'd like to have a breakfast informing you about what adult stem cells do, what they have done. We brought a bunch of patients down there. We did that in 15. So in 17, the Texas legislature only meets 5 months every 2 years. So we had to wait for 2 years. And then we started again in January of 17. And this time, it wasn't just our efforts. It was,
Hmm.
there's just a lot more information out there that, hey, there are other types of stem cells that aren't harming anybody or preventing a birth or anything like that. Just essentially biologic waste. That's what we work with. This stuff is going to be thrown away. It's going to be incinerated. That's our starting material. So I don't feel like it's near the dirty word it used to be, but I still get it. I
I
still hear
mean,
people.
the edge, I mean, that certainly the edge is coming off a bit, but there's a lot of misinformation even amongst, my colleagues, because I talk about stem cells all the time now with even my colleagues, and some of them are like, oh, I don't know, it's
Yeah,
laws and
unproven.
laws and yeah, well, the unproven thing. The thing I love about what you have done is you haven't just said, wow, this stuff works and we're going to just do it in all these people and all these movie stars are going to come out and get these treatments and that's it. You've actually published tremendous, amount of work on so many different, diseases, which is actually really interesting. Your first book, which is more the nerd out book, the MSCs book, there's like 800 citations,
Yeah.
strong citations, and you looked at over 40 different diseases that these things can help on. And we'll go through some of those, after. But I just want to stick on this misinformation theme because it's something that bothers me. I mean, I just did a TED Talk, Minneapolis TEDx, and I just wanted to cut through it where this embryonic thing, where it's embryonic and it always involves this and it always involves that. It's part of it, I think, is based on just people not understanding or things that have come down the road or all that stuff that happened in California where they were trying to push the embryonic cell. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of history to that. We can't go through all that. But I think that part of it, I think that there are industries, okay, there's this industrial complex of people that when you have therapies that are so effective in certain conditions, you're going to have powers that be themselves sadly spreading misinformation about these things. And we know, I mean, we just know that, right? I mean, right away, if you're trying to publish something on stem cells or talking about stem cells, there's just these people that just pop up. That right? They just, and I know you've been down this road, but I also see it. I see it in comments and certain things. Like when things kind of reach a point where it's more viral, where people are talking about stem cells, there's always these interesting comments. I don't know if they're bots or if they're real people, but I'm like, is this industry trying to hold things back? Because remember, our medical system is predicated on keeping people sick, unwell, inflamed, mitochondrial dysfunction, all those things. It's great for business. $4.4 trillion, massive industry. 10% of it is on preventative care. And I would kind of put stem cells in regenerative medicine more in the preventative care bucket, because not like we're opening people up and doing some massive things. You're just injecting them, or either injecting them systemically or directed. So how much do you think the medical industrial complex is responsible for pushing against what we know now? I mean, the results are what they are what they are. I mean, the papers are out there. I'm sure they're lobbying to congressmen and women and locally, just saying, hey, this stuff is dangerous. Everyone's going to get cancer from it, right? How many tens of thousands you guys have injected? You've had zero.
Serious adverse.
Zero.
Yeah, zero.
That when I read that in the book, I was like, I'm calling this guy. I was like, this is I need to communicate, because we really have to have these conversations. But I'll let you take it from here. It's not just the bias that's there. There's more to it. There's just more to it. And that's the same with other things we've talked about, peptides, all these things that can really help. It doesn't help big pharma. It doesn't help big industry, people that are trying to sell, implants, knee replacements, spine fusion stuff. I know all those guys. They're like, why are you talking about that stuff? You're not supposed to talk about that stuff.
I'll tell you a story.
Yeah, please.
So just to try and understand the economics, because there are multiple layers of economic impact. We had a guy with a spinal cord injury that came to Panama, and we were treating him for his spinal cord injury with, treating him intrathecally and also intravenously. And his carpal tunnel syndrome went away. I called the hand surgeon and I said, hey, would you like to do a clinical trial with us studying carpal tunnel syndrome with intravenous cells? And he kind of turned a little pale, and he said, I have kids that need to go to college.
Whoa.
And I was like, well, but if this works, it's going to help so many people. And he said, well, that's 90% of my business, is opening up that, what is it? The medial nerve.
You're opening up that getting that free. Yeah, absolutely. So snip. It's just a little snip.
Right. So he was not, but that's just one example of, at the doctor level, they're not incentivized. And it's like, last thing you want to do is fix that, unless he were part of the deal, which that came out too. If I were part of the deal, I wouldn't mind doing it. But as far as just doing the clinical trial and paying them a reasonable amount to enroll patients and do the study and evaluate them afterwards, that's at all levels. So you have it from the provider level, you have it at the device manufacturer level, the pharmaceutical level, And even at the insurance level, some of these insurance are basically cost plus business. So the more it costs, the more they make, right?
People don't understand that part of it, that part of the economics. I mean, I've talked about that quite a bit, but it's interesting because in my TED talk, what I said is that a lot of these therapies and clearly regenerative medicine is in that bucket. Um, there's not that traditional middleman that has their hand out, right? In between. A lot of it is between the providers or the clinics that are offering these therapies, especially when it's autologous. Now there are, products and things like that when we talk about these, cord blood and placental products and things like that. But it's not in the traditional sense where there are these middlemen, because I would be honest with you, as surgeon, it's interesting that surgeon said that, because I've heard that before with some of the patients we've treated. I've gotten some calls. I've gotten 2 calls actually, and I talk about it privately. I don't want to out people or do anything, where we've treated people utilizing different biohacking techniques and light and laser therapies and things like that, where they've canceled their surgeries, and we had some unhappy surgeons because of that. And my pushback to that is, when we put on our white coats, wasn't it about like not like trying to help the patients? I get it, do no whatever, but isn't it about trying to to help the patients? But we don't have, there's not that traditional middleman to profit, because when you have a massive profit, like for example, if you look at this, if there was a middleman that was one of these big corporations out here and they were profiting big time from stem cells, every other commercial, literally, there's nothing that would be on television other than stem cells. Right, it would be right. Right, we're right across the street, from where the Lakers play,
Stadium, yeah.
and it would be called, right, Stem Cell Center, Stem Cell, whatever. I don't want to. I never call out specific names of companies, because I don't want to get any nasty letters in the mail. So I'm always very broad. Even when I talk about insurance companies, we don't say names. But isn't it? I mean, it's true. It would literally be, get your stem cells. You need to get your stem cells. All of a sudden, everyone would require stem cells. Oh, millions of people are suffering from all these chronic diseases. You have to get your stem cells. What are you waiting for? And they would show people just dancing, flying the kite. Hey, I'm feeling great. This is the best I've ever felt, right? All these commercials. Sky Rizzy, all these other, I just put that one, I'll pick on, because I see that one, constantly. Rinvoq, all these other things. I mean, half of those things, because we're as orthopedic surgeons, whatever, we don't deal with that stuff. So half of those times, I go, what is that drug? I don't even know what that drug. Half the time we don't even know what those drugs are. But it's very interesting that with the, and I'm sure you've seen that. So it's hard to push it forward, because from a lobbying power standpoint, I mean, how much lobbying power do you really think? Like, I know that and I thank you, by the way, for doing that, but how much power, like how much money is there behind it?
Well, I'll just give you an example. In 17, it looked like we were getting traction for the law that was passed
Yeah.
in Texas. And there were a dozen lobbyists from Washington that worked for pharmaceutical companies. We had one lawyer. That was it. We had a budget of about $20,000, and we had one lawyer, and we did grassroots, and we brought a bunch of patients down to Austin many times, and we had these roundtable discussions at breakfast and at lunch, and that was basically enough for us to get that law passed. Now, the law didn't get out of the rules committee in a way that made it super functional, because it was very onerous, but we did get the law passed. But we were against a dozen
That's incredible.
very, very well funded pharma people that they would see our meetings, they would go right behind us, and they would just go in and make their pitch to the people. Thankfully, Texas really doesn't have a pharma industry. I mean, we have a couple of biotech companies, maybe a half dozen biotech companies, but we don't really have a pharma industry. But there's no way you would get that Texas law passed in New Jersey or California, an actual stem cell bill. In California, that's a whole different subject. But as far as money on the other side, let me give you an example. We do have our first stem cell product approved in the U.S. in this class. So there's 2 major types of stem cells in the body.
Yep.
There are hematopoietic stem cells, which are found in your bone marrow. They're found other places, but the primary depot is the bone marrow, and they produce all of our white cells and red cells and platelets,
Yep.
and keep us alive. And if those are gone, you're dead quickly. But you have the MSCs, the mesenchymal
Mm-hmm.
stem cells. We'll just call them MSCs. MSCs are found in every tissue in your body, including the bone marrow. In fact, this is something that most people don't realize is that without MSCs, you would die of an infection just as
Of
quickly
course,
without the
of
HSCs,
course.
because the MSCs support the HSC's ability to divide and produce more blood cells. With no MSCs, HSCs
Mm-hmm.
have no engine anymore. Arnie Kaplan was my mentor. He passed away about a little over a year ago, but
Brilliant guy.
he was incredible. He was
Brilliant.
at Case
Yep.
Western Reserve. He's the one that named the mesenchymal stem cell. Arnie and I were talking, right? The last conversation we had before I knew he was ill,
Mm.
and we talked about this new drug that's it's not a new drug. His company, all of his patents were they basically formed a company around Arnie's patent portfolio on bone marrow derived MSCs, and their big thing was they can positively affect a runaway immune system, and that's and so their first indication they were used in was graft versus host disease,
Mm-hmm.
where
Makes
you get
sense.
a new immune system because yours is broken, usually from chemotherapy
Mm.
or something from cancer, and then you get a bone marrow transplant. But I'm sure everybody's heard of that. Well, that bone marrow transplant then starts attacking your body because it sees it as foreign. So you can actually give these cells to somebody with that, and in many, many cases, reverse the
Mm.
graft versus host disease, which is once it's steroid resistant, is 100% fatal. So if you save 1 out of 10, you're still winning. And these cells save between 4 and 6 out of 10, depending on what
Wow.
patient population. And they had already gotten approvals in Canada, New Zealand, Japan, Korea for this drug product. It's not a drug product. It's bone marrow aspirate that is plated. The cells
Mm.
grow, and then they make a product. They infuse it intravenously, 15-minute infusion, and you take somebody who's 100% going to die and save at least half of them. This drug was up for approval in the United States, and it was roughly 2 years ago. There's a committee at FDA that decides it's a non-binding recommendation. 10 experts per drug that's in their
Mm.
field. 8 out of 10 said 2 years ago they said yes, approve it. Very rarely does FDA go against this committee, and in this case they said no, we're not going to approve it. Roughly 8 months after that disapproval, it came up for vote again. 9 out of 10 said yes, approve it. Guess what? No, it's not
Wow.
approved. Then it took another 4 or 5 months. It took a new president being installed, the threat of a new HHS secretary, a threat of a new FDA commissioner, and then the director of CBER approved it finally after the election, because in my opinion he saw his job coming to an end if he didn't approve a stem cell product. Because I don't know if you saw RFK Jr.'s tweet. He wasn't even nominated yet, but Trump had won. It
Mm.
would have been like in December, and he said, I have a message for all you at FDA who have been suppressing stem cells, peptides, nutrition,
Yes, I remember. Yep.
integrative sort of things. I have two messages for you. One, preserve your records. Two, pack your bags. And so it was right about that time that Peter Marks, who was the head of CBER, approved that drug that should have been, by all rights, should have been approved, in my
Years
opinion,
ago.
5, 6, 7, 8
Yes.
years ago,
Yes.
depending on the science. I can tell you that I asked Arnie, I said, Arnie passed away before that happened. I said, Arnie, why do you think they keep doing this? Because this was in September after they said no in August. 9 out of 10 on the committee said
Wow.
approve it. And he said, Neil, the only thing I can think of is that they don't want the door to get kicked open. They don't want a crack in the door, because when you get a crack in the door, then people can use it for off-label use. And the last thing they want to know, as you well know, uh, these cells are so good for inflammatory
Mhm.
conditions, autoimmune conditions. And prior to the GLP drugs, they're the largest drugs on the planet from a financial perspective were these antibodies, Humira,
Hmm.
Enbrel,
Yep.
Luspatercept,
Huge. Huge.
Skyrizi. I don't know what Skyrizi is, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know that whole anti-rheumatic world, because inflammation is
And I can just tell you, you bring that up, you bring up Humira and these other drugs, as a lot of my patients as a spine surgeon are on those, and they're terrible. for healing, recovery, infection rates, all these other things. A lot of times we have to stop them, and then they relapse, and it's a huge thing. And I have to where I have to go back and forth with their rheumatologist or immunologist, whoever, to figure it out. But their complication rates are so much higher, when it comes to surgery. So I think going down this other path would be so much better
Well,
for these patients. So much better.
For the audience, I'll back
Yeah.
up just a bit.
Yeah.
But those drugs are antibodies, so they bind up and neutralize bad things in the body,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very specific. So most of them, the first class were the TNF alpha inhibitors. So that's a kind of a general of the immune system that creates havoc, and it's found whenever there's inflammation, and it's a major cause of inflammation. So if you could sequester it, it's a brilliant idea. If you could sequester it, get rid of it, then you're going to feel great. And initially, these patients feel like $1 million.
Of course, because it's
a
just
complete miracle because they just
Of course.
lowered that. And then there's the next class is for IL-6, it's just a category. We'll call them inflammation 1 and inflammation 2, the general 1 and general 2. And those have been well covered. The problem is after a period of time, first of all, they're not doing anything they're not resetting the immune system so it quits making those. They're just mopping up what's circulating.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, after you get this foreign protein antibody injected into your body, then your immune system says, well, now that's foreign, and then it quits working. So now there are about a dozen of them approved. So you try this one, it quits working, you try the next one. The interesting thing is the stem cells, when you do an intravenous infusion of umbilical cord MSCs, after one treatment cycle, the TNF alpha, this is a published study, not mine, 172 patients with rheumatoid arthritis, the TNF alpha dropped by 50% after one treatment cycle.
It's amazing.
IL-6 dropped by 50%. Give them another cycle, and it drops another 50%. So now you have a population of people that were totally inflamed, suffering tremendously from rheumatic disease, who are all better, and all they did was sit down and get 2 IVs. And then that persists for a very long time. Our longest patient, we have a patient with rheumatoid arthritis, 17 years out, who hasn't needed another treatment. So that screws up a lot of business models, including ours, because if you have this very prolonged effect, then people aren't going to come back and get more drug, But for me, that's fine. I think we should just
it's interesting because you said that there are millions of people, millions and millions and millions of people. You can't even go through the amount of people that need some of these, regenerative therapies. There's so many. So you almost don't even need repeat customers, because it's going to take decades to get through. Maybe not. It depends on how many people, start doing it. I want to take a step back. The rheumatoid arthritis. I just want to say, my dad, who passed. He passed of lung cancer, but before he got lung cancer, he suffered from rheumatoid arthritis. It was horrible, to watch him, and the pain. And he went all the DMARDs, the disease modifying, all the things we just talked about. I wish I had known about some of these therapies then. And we just go back. We backtrack, say, man, I wish I had known better, at that time. But just backtracking. So I just want to just for the audience, so that you get it, because I wanted to start with starting to talk about why some of this misinformation's out there. But let's start talking about like what's available in the US and what you guys are doing down in Panama. So what we think of adult, like us, like me and you, getting our stem cells taken and then putting back in your body, we call that autologous, stem cells. It's your own stem cells. That's not frowned upon by anybody. We're allowed to do it in the U.S. We do it. You can do targeted stem cell treatments. That's what my partner does. That we do a lot of those. They have excellent. There's really good data supporting those things. Mostly in orthopedics, spine literature is improving fairly quickly. What we're really kind of diving into today are these day zero cells, which have that, when we talk about the golden cells and all the stuff you like to talk about, those are the ones that I have such strong feelings about them, because from delivering them systemically, it's just such an amazing impact. And that's why I was so like, I mean, I just going through all those studies in your books, it's just fascinating what's out there. As a physician that is on now this integrative health bandwagon, I mean, it is like, and seeing how sick people are, it's really disheartening that we are so far behind. Because I know, like, obviously Japan has a lot looser laws. Even like the Yale's like spinal cord, injury study, even though they were using autologous cells, I mean, they kind of worked with, some of the groups in Japan because they have, it's just a lot of stuff. We're not going to get into the little nuances. I just want people to understand like what's available in the US. So if you want, I know you guys have a center, you still have the center in Texas. People can go there and get their autologous cells. You have a shoulder problem, you have knee osteoarthritis, whatever, we have that in our, that kind of stuff in our center. But if you want to get the systemic, day zero cells like Mel Gibson's dad got, which is that's an amazing. I mean, it's a great story, right? Because he was gassed out. He just kind of ran out of stem cells, and he wasn't well.
Right.
That's what we're lobbying for. I just want people to know we're not really even talking about autologous stem cells, even though those are way underused in the U.S., especially kind of some of the subchondral stuff we were talking about, like the intraosseous injections and the precision-directed spinal, guided, stem cell injections. They're way underused because we could really be helping so many people to avoid surgery and get their lives back, go back to work, and do all these other things. But when it comes to these day, zero stem cells used systemically, what I'd like you to like really just make people understand is why. First of all, how they work, right? They're these living pharmacies that just pump out all these beautiful, just this amazing, all these substances, lots of them, right? How they work and why they've been so effective, even in all these diseases, in a huge, broad array of diseases. Can you talk about like really, because that's one thing that the audience really needs to know. How do these things work?
Right.
And then why are they so powerful when they're day zero cells, especially from a systemic standpoint?
One is spinal cord, another heart failure.
Yes.
And then we'll just do a basket of autoimmune.
I love it.
Right.
Yes.
So with spinal cord, our MSCs are found everywhere in our body, but they predominantly hang out on blood vessels. Every tissue in your body has its own stem cell. So there's a liver stem cell. Next to it is an MSC supporting it. Lung, heart, kidneys, intestine, skin, every part of your body has its tissue-specific stem cells. So the liver is highly vascularized.
Right.
And so it has way more capillaries for MSCs to hang out on. So it kind of, outside of the bone marrow, it has more MSCs. Well, what can you do to a liver that you can't do to any other organ in the body? You can cut 80% of it out, you leave 20% left, and it will regrow because it has the energy. It has more tissue-specific stem cells and has more MSC, so it's able to regrow itself. Fascinating regeneration capacity. So in spinal cord injury, you're a spinal surgeon. You know this.
You're talking to the right guy.
This more than anybody else that I've ever talked to. But there's very little vasculature feeding the spinal cord. So we created, evolutionarily, or God gave us this wonderful cage around our central nervous system to protect it. And there's just not a lot of blood supply there. So there are very few MSCs hanging around in the central nervous system. So if you break it or cut it, so the MSC is our repair cell. So if you cut yourself, you're going to take the MSC is going to fall off the blood vessel, the ones that survive, or if you smash yourself in a car accident or whatever, you injure yourself, the MSCs are released from the blood vessel and they're actually kind of quiescent, they're kind of relaxed, they're not doing a lot because, hey, our job is to take care of any problems. So they're mostly just hanging out waiting. If you're super healthy, they're just going to hang out and wait. But when you're injured, then they get activated. And through that activation, they stimulate repair. And so in the case of spinal cord injury, you smash it, but there aren't enough of them around. So you can actually cut, and this is a study done in 2008 where they cut spinal cords of rats.
To fast, I know it's amazing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so and then when they
Yeah.
do that, the spinal cord goes boink. It tugs on it, and so there's a gap.
Yep.
So there's literally no communication. And they took umbilical cord MSCs, put them in there with a fibrin, basically a little glue, natural glue, and they were human cells, and they put them in the rat. And what happened? The spinal cord regrew. But if they just put fibrin in there, no cells, they didn't regrow. They didn't regrow, and spinal
Hmm.
cord basically reconnected. And it was a mess because it wasn't like how it's done when you're forming the body. It was a mess, but there was connection, and some of these animals could move their hind limbs, where none of the
It's
controls
amazing.
could.
It's
And then they
fascinating.
look
Yeah.
under microscope to see, okay, did this is a big point. Did the cells become part
Yes.
of the central nervous system? The answer is no, they didn't. They just sat there and secreted things that stimulated the normal repair process that the spinal cord just naturally doesn't have a bunch of this repair because it doesn't have any. It has very little vasculature. It has very few MSCs. There's not enough there to repair it. So all we're doing is putting something there that in any other part of the body stimulates repair, and the repair occurs. And these are human cells, so they're able to identify them, and they're sitting there between the fibers that have reconnected, but they're not integrating into the tissue. So one big myth about these kind of stem cells is, yeah, they can become all these different tissues, but do they? Every study in adults, meaning after birth, from when you're born on
Hmm.
up, they don't incorporate it into the human body. They don't incorporate it
Exactly. Yep.
into goats, pigs, dogs, whatever, any kind of animal. They don't become anything, but they're there to stimulate and help repair things. And so in the case of spinal cord injury, it's not nothing magical. They're not becoming new neurons. They're not contributing whatsoever to the central nervous system other than their
Right.
secretions, and their secretions stimulate this natural repair process. So that's one
You
case.
know, I just interject. Your mentor, Dr. Kaplan, and I said this, and it's fascinating. He wanted to rename the cells medicinal signaling
In
cells.
fact, he did.
Yeah,
He did, and some of industry has taken that up, and I think that's the correct name
that
for
is
them
the correct
because
name. They just said they're pharmacies. They're just
they're
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 pumping
they're
out
they're drug factories, they're
exactly,
doctors diagnosing, they're
exactly.
pharmacies
Yeah,
producing, and they're doctors delivering. I mean, they do everything. They read the environment, they manufacture what's
yeah,
needed to
right.
overcome
Yeah,
what's going on. They read inflammatory signals. If you
yeah.
put inflammatory stuff on a man, they just go
Well,
berserk.
they go find that that's the process of homing
Right.
because they have like almost a GPS signal, and
Yeah,
then they find the chemical SOS, and they
that's a good
find
way
it.
to
I know
put
you
it.
talk about that a lot in your
Yeah.
in your book.
Yeah, it's kind of like Velcro is made out of hooks and loops. So the cells have hooks on them, and they
Uh,
basically pass by in the loop, and they catch on the loop. These are intercellular
I'm
heat
going to use that. I
molecules,
like that.
ICAMs.
I'm
They're-
going to
you-
use
It's all
that.
yours,
Hooks and
baby.
loops.
Yeah, and so they don't necessarily go somewhere, but they'll stop whenever they feel that
Hmm.
inflammation and start doing their work. If we skip to heart failure, um, there was a paper, a guy at University of Buffalo. I'm blanking on his name, but this was a long time ago too. And the hamster model of heart failure most closely mimics the human condition. And so he gave intravenous cells to the hamsters, and he found that it repaired the hearts. The hearts got better. So then he injected them into the muscle, into the calf muscle,
Hmm.
and the hearts got better. And he said, "Well, wait a minute." So and he also looked for the cells like in the heart after he gave him IV. There were some in the heart, but very very few, not enough to account for this big shift.
Hmm.
And so he then injected into the muscle, and he found all of them in the calf muscle afterwards. But the hearts got better. So then he took the secretions of the cells and he gave that, and the hearts got better. So just giving the secretions of the cells can help.
Just having that systemically going
Right.
was what
Right.
can
Not as
repair the
much,
heart,
not as much as the IV, not as much as the intramuscular, but
but still happening.
still
Yeah.
still improvement. So I think the cells work best when they're in the local environment, reading
Mm.
the room so that they're getting the prescription, so to speak.
Hmm.
So in the case of if you just use the secretions of the cells, then they're not getting the prescription. They're just best guessing it. Like this environment could be used. They stimulate regeneration in both of those cases. In the case of heart failure, they're also very potently anti-inflammatory. There's a lot of inflammation that occurs in heart failure. In ischemic heart failure, you have this zone of ischemia where the heart attack occurred, and then there's a dead tissue area, and then that area between the dead and the fully live, it's a transitional zone, and that's what you're able to get back with intravenous stem cell treatment, is that transition.
Because there's still some there's still some
a
cells
lot of
that can be,
inflammation going on in there, and so you get an immediate anti-inflammatory effect, and then you get the secretion of the molecules that stimulate the regeneration. And in the case of autoimmune conditions, almost every autoimmune condition has they have a deficiency of a certain kind of T cell that regulates how other T cells act and how macrophages act, different immune cells act. They're called T regulatory cells, and they're usually very, very low. If you have somebody with severe rheumatoid arthritis, they're going to be very low. Somebody with severe lupus, they're going to be low. MS, all these autoimmune diseases, you find that those T regulatory cells are just they're not around. And so you give IV stem cell, IV MSCs, umbilical MSCs, Tregs go up. And those T regulatory cells say to the B cells that are misbehaving and the T cells that are misbehaving, hey, just calm down.
Calm
They're
down.
like
Calm
motherly cells, and it's like, relax, just chill out. And we don't know why. I don't know why that happens, but it just happens in every single case. You get a normalization of T regulatory cells, which are basically, they control all this inflammatory stuff. And when those come up, the macrophages quit producing TNF and IL-6 and all these inflammatory molecules naturally. And then the clones, B cell clones and T cell clones, once there's that clonal expansion going on, it's very difficult to control. And Tregs cut off all clonal expansion, both on the B cell side and the T cell side. So they're just very potent anti-inflammatories. And unlike steroids, which have these negative effects, catabolic effects, they break down
absolutely
tissue.
And cartilage.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the problem with all these constant injections.
A lot of steroids
of course,
are toxic to the chondrocytes, the cells that build cartilage. But the MSCs, on the other hand, they have the opposite effect. They stimulate repair rather than breakdown.
I remember when I was at Columbia in med school, immunology, for people that haven't gone to med school and, or haven't like studied it like yourself as a PhD and all that stuff, it's one of the most fascinating things. And there's a reason that, like you say, I don't really know why that happens. It just does, because it's so complicated. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of molecules involved in signaling all these things, and nature has a purpose. That's why as a species, we're still here 300,000 years later, because we can repair ourselves. If we didn't have all that, it's insane. AI is going to make it go faster, by the way. We're going to figure out a lot of why it's happening, but it's happening. And that's the important thing. It's happening, and it's happening without people keeling over or getting cancers or getting anything, in tens of thousands of patients that you guys have treated down in Panama. So what are we waiting for?
Good point.
Good point. Like, honestly, like, what are we waiting for? We could take a step back while you think, I know this is, I'm sure that you've spent a long time thinking, like, what are we waiting for? Let's go, let's get this going. You're trying to, on the spinal cord injury thing, obviously, as a spine surgeon, the potential, and we've kind of chatted about it, before briefly. I talked often about the two studies that were done just using autologous same cells. One was done at Mayo Clinic, and actually, kind of one of the stars of my TED Talk was this young woman, Christina, that had a horrible cervical fracture. They repaired it. She went from a C4 C4 meaning that she could, barely move her, maybe use her arms a little bit, to almost normal, biceps function. And she got in about a year
Mm-hmm.
after her spinal cord injury. And then the data from the Yale study was really, really good. And they're not even, I mean, these aren't, day zero cells. These are the patient's own cells. And I know, your feeling, and I've read some of the other work that was done in spinal cord. I want to ask you about your patient Juan Carlos, because he's a big star in your book, and I know you talk about him, quite often. But I think, like, I don't want to just keep pounding on the same thing, but why in the world, at least in the U.S., right? We could do autologous stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The day zero cells are probably going to be better for spinal cord injury when we do it, but why is this just not a thing right now? I mean, what
Well,
else do you need to? They have a spinal cord injury. We take care of we go to the emergency room. Okay, a lot of mostly my neurosurgical, colleagues, are taking care of the spinal cord injuries. Like one of the level trauma centers we're at, and we see patients. You talk to them, they can't feel anything, they can't move. Why isn't it just standard
well,
of care already?
yeah. So
Like, really?
even the autologous studies that you're talking about, these aren't just let's pull some bone marrow out, or they're actually grown, right?
Yeah,
So the Yale study, they
yeah.
took
They grew them, and they had
they
this
grew
this with the
patients up,
scaffolding.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so the scaffold is a new drug, the
Yeah.
cells are a
That's
new drug. So the problem is our regulatory environment is archaic, and we're operating on rules in our manufacturing facility. The rules that we are operating on were written in 1998. They were published in 1998, and they didn't even know what a stem cell was. In 1998, so we're governed by these regulations. They're just so archaic, and I hope that's going to change. It looks like things are going to change. Uh, and I mean, politics is politics, unfortunately, but I feel like I've never been more hopeful than I am right now that
Politics
things.
should not be an issue when it comes to taking care of our very sick. You know how silly it is to say the United States of America, right? Right now, we're getting all tariff revenue, we're getting stuff. We've been the richest country for a long time. Politics getting in the way of taking care of patients with things that doctors are saying are creating miracles in their patients, and we let politics get in the way of that. I mean, just does that even is that okay? Is this what we want to be as a society? Seriously, is this what we want to be as a society?
Yeah, it's been a very long, frustrating road for
I'm
me,
sure
as you
it
can
has.
imagine. When you take a kid like Juan Carlos,
Yeah,
who was an Asia A,
yeah,
couldn't function even
devastating.
though his
Yeah,
his uh, his injury crashed his airplane and
sweet.
basically was broken in half, and you take him, and luckily for us, he was local, so we could just keep treating him. There was no, he got to get on an airplane, fly down, all
No,
that kind of
no.
stuff. We just treated him locally, and gosh, in a year my office sat right in the front of the building, and there was a handicap parking space there, and this kid wheels in there, jumps out of the car, runs in the building, and I'm like, bro, what are you doing in the handicap? And it's him. I said,
So
you're
great.
gonna have to move to the regular spaces, but so you have that, right? So you talk about there are dollars on the other side. Well, so we actually uh, we wrote a paper, and it was published about his case. And you would think it would have been picked up by a lot of news services. And there was actually, a little press release saying, hey, well, this thing. There was one like radio station, sports radio station in Chicago that picked it up, nothing else. Then a pharmaceutical company has their stem cell drug, and they push it out there. 4,000, greater than 4,000 news outlets throughout the world, and the guy could move his little finger,
That
right?
sounds about right.
That was his benefit, right? He's not jumping out of his car coming in. So there's a lot of money on the other side of this. It is insane that a doctor cannot take the Yale study, for example. A doctor can't take progenitors, MSCs from a
Right.
patient, grow them in a
Because we
laboratory,
can't manipulate them.
and
That's the thing, folks. I mean, just so
right,
that people, because we want to get in the weeds. We're but We
Well,
can't
the
manip.
FDA, the
You
FDA has
can't. We can't like do anything to them. They have to be like
right. I have to get.
minimally manipulated,
Yeah,
and
well, I have to
that's
file an IND. You know
yeah, yeah,
how much time and energy and
and
cost that is.
money.
Yeah, it crazily expensive. And if I'm going to do it on a per case basis, which I've done successfully many times, but at some point you're just like, this is ridiculous.
Of
Every
course it
single
is.
case now I have to go ask some bureaucrat if I can do this exact same thing that I've done all these other times, and now I have to ask, and you get a different examiner, and they have to be educated. It's very expensive,
Yep.
time consuming, and it'll turn a lot of doctors off. I can tell you when you have to do all this paperwork just to help somebody. So, for example, in Germany, in Italy, Germany, France, and you have this hospital exemption, right? So you have the EMA,
Mhm.
the medical FDA of Europe, but they have hospital exemptions. So a doctor can say, "Hey, we've done this before. We'd like to do it again on this patient." And they just have an IRB meeting, and it's bam, bam, and there you go. And you're doing it next week. We can't do that in the US. We don't have a hospital exemption. We don't have, they claim that like 99% of all these emergency things are approved, which may be true, but not many people file them because they're just so much work. It's so expensive.
I mean, that's part of the strategy, though. That's no different than what the insurance companies do to us too, right? The more hoops, the more loops, the more expensive things get.
Well,
Doctors just give up. They're like, screw
that's
it.
one way to
They honestly, they're just like, I'm not doing that. And no matter, it does. First of all, the finance, when it comes to like doing these studies, they cost a ridiculous amount of money. So unless you have some kind of crazy funding,
yeah,
you can't do it.
literally
Can't do it.
tens of millions of dollars. For a very small phase 2 study, it would be like 30 or 40 million dollars just for that.
And
And
who's paying? We don't have pharma to pay for these things. I mean, when they want to study their Alzheimer's drug, that by the way, the panel didn't really like too much.
right,
I had no problem doing the studies on that, right?
right,
And
right.
a lot of people quit over it. We're not gonna. I try to stay away from like really
Hmm.
controversial things, but it's just frustrating. So I just want, so just so everyone understands. So you have this guy Juan Carlos. Asia A means he got nothing,
No,
zero.
no function
He's just
or
nothing,
sensitivity
nothing,
proven.
just
Yeah.
dead,
Uh-huh.
dead legs, nothing. And he ran into your office,
Yeah.
okay? And it's not picked up by any paper. And
And it was published in the scientific
this
journal.
is but I'm just saying this is the problem, and us as physicians, just as a like whatever, us as physicians, you as a researcher, all we, if we don't step up, if we give up, if we don't fight this fight, it ain't ever, it's really not going to change, and we are losing this war, right? I mean, I post all the time about my colleagues now that there,
Mhm.
it is like you click on one thing on Instagram, right, and then your whole Instagram feed is the same thing. So
Mhm.
anytime I see a doctor complaining about an insurance company, I kind of click on it. So now my entire Instagram feed is doctors, whatever, just saying, oh, this patient, they denied this and they denied this drug and they denied this, and I'm like, you guys have to keep fighting. Don't give up. They want you to give up, because then you just walk away and they win. So we can't. So I hope that the people that are watching this or seeing a clip of it or something understand, here's a paralyzed person who has nothing, and those people don't come back on their own, because he was about 6 months, I
He
think,
was
right? When you
6 months and 3 days when
if
he
you're
started.
at 6 months and 3 days and you don't have just even the tiniest amount of sensation, okay, most of us would consider that is not gonna, the prognosis is not good. Maybe if they're 18 or 19 years old, they still got a chance, because I've seen some young people. You get to a certain point and it's, but you wouldn't expect them to be running around. Maybe
Right.
they wiggle a toe or they get some sensation on their thigh or
Right.
something like that. I mean, we see that all the time. So I mean, this is devastating. I mean, you changed that person's life. They were sentenced, they were trapped. They would have been
Right.
trapped in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
and they're not. That should be the front page of every paper in the United States of America, Canada, Mexico, and anywhere else you want to mention.
Yeah.
So it's got to be frustrating. I think in the spinal cord world, combining the stem cells with the scaffolding, but then also, there's some really cool work done in, like with these nanoparticles that and AI is really making a huge, one of the guy that he runs the Society for Mapping, Dr. Koteb, he's really into it. He has this textbook of nanosurgery, and it's just it's just really going to be another fascinating world, but being able to just
Mm.
connect the stem cells with the nanoparticles, and then even if you have like something like those I think it's like iron oxide or something like
Mhm.
that, you can just like use magnetic chambers to guide them to exactly where you want to go, so you're doubling or tripling or quadrupling that homing process and helping them to go home.
Mhm.
So I think that the future for spinal cord injury, I think, and I know we talked about it, right? We as surgeons, we fix it, we open it up, we put in these mesenchymal stem cells with their scaffold and everything, even maybe potentially doing a pump where they're
Mhm.
constantly getting new, fresh stem cells over time, which I think is a brilliant, brilliant idea. And I think so many more people are going to be able to walk
Absolutely.
afterwards because
Yeah.
when the cord's crushed, it's tough. It's tough
And all you're doing is putting something there that would normally be there in any other tissue, but because of the
because if
specialty of the central nervous system, just they were left behind. So all you're doing is you're
yeah,
just moving them, from another person into that person in a
yeah.
place where they're needed. That's it. It's so basic and so simple. I try not to complicate it, but you're taking a cell that's its job is to repair stuff, and you're just putting it in a place that needs repair. That's it.
It's basic, it's simple, and I mean it has to be the future. And I want to, I want to be part of that. These are things I've already like mentioned some of these things to my partners. They've never heard about any of these things. A lot of times they haven't even heard about the Mayo Clinic study or Yale, because those things those aren't very publicized at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. That's not like a big thing in our communities. And Mayo's right down the road from us. Now, my other question on spinal cords, and then I want to get into some of this fascinating stuff with autoimmune diseases and some of the kind of things you treat, especially MS. I have a lot of people that I know that have MS. I'd love to send them your way. But on the spinal cord injury, do you find are you still accepting patients after 1 year with your spinal cord injuries, or do you kind of just say, well, we can try it, but we're not super excited about what we might see, or is it a 2 year cutoff or three? Like, worry, because I know in those other trials it's a year, right? It's a little
Well,
bit different.
because we're so very busy, we limit spinal cord cases to one a month, and
Oh,
it's very
really? I
intense.
didn't. Wow.
It's a very intensive treatment. A lot of them are very sick, as you
Of
know.
course.
You can run into very serious blood pressure
Yeah,
problems,
because they have the
and
dysautonomia. Your
this
autonomic system's off, and
right.
it's tough. They're tough to
And
deal
if
with.
you have to
Yeah.
pee and you don't know how to pee, the rest of the body gets a signal, but you don't. It's a real problem that you can have blood pressures, you know, two 240
Yeah. Yeah.
real quick.
Stroke and all
So
that
yeah,
stuff.
very
Yeah.
very high risk patients. So we don't really have a cutoff, but we have denied so many people because the older you are, the less chance of you
Yeah. When
getting
everybody, I
better
mean, that's, yeah.
in any
In
disease,
any
right?
disease,
Right.
in any disease.
And then the longer you are from
Right.
injury, and then of course if you have a complete injury, um, it's if you have something coming back, that's what
Absolutely, yeah,
our
absolutely
doctors
ideal.
look for. If you just have a little bit coming back, then it's worth it. If you don't have anything coming back, it's likely not. But man, miracles. The first viral video I had, which was my daughter posted, I I got a this 53-year-old guy from Chicago. His injury was when he was it was 13 years before. He was 40 years old. And he just kept asking and asking. I'm like, bro, like the likelihood of success, you're 53,
Did you say 13?
13 years out.
13 years, not 13 months, 13 years. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Keep going.
13 years. And he just insisted. He said, well, are they gonna kill me? Are they gonna hurt me? And he's like, money's no object. I'd be glad to, I said, look, I don't want you spending your money because I don't think it's likely to
Of course.
succeed.
Yeah.
Right. And ultimately, after many, many attempts, my medical team decided to take him just because he was relentless and he fully understood that the odds were stacked against him. And he came down, he sent me a video of him walking
Right.
out of his garage with a walker and his wife is videotaping him,
Right.
and he walks out his garage into the street and then comes back around, and then he looks at the camera and says, "This is the first time I've walked in 13 years," or something like that. That to me was really profound.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's in the miracle category. But
yeah.
again, the audience is like, we get it. A guy like that, where was he from originally?
He's originally from Central Europe.
Oh, Central Europe. I was going to say, like, maybe he's from Chicago. I'm like, a guy like that should be walking in his walker to the middle of Soldier Field,
Uh-huh.
right? And just be said, this guy was paralyzed for 13 years and he's walking. That's
Yeah.
how big of a deal these things are. And again, when we talk about right to try stuff, if somebody that I know or myself or somebody has paralysis, why would you not want to try something like that where
That's
the
a
safety profile is so good?
Yeah, that's a great point. And so this is where federal right to try. So in 2018, we passed the Federal Right to Try Act, which allows people with terminal illnesses to get any treatment that's already passed phase one. So our cells, we've done 3 phase 1 studies on them, and we're in phase 2 trials. So if your drug, whatever it is, biologic
Mm,
or whatever it is, if you have a terminal illness, you have the right to seek that treatment, and the company is not forced to provide it to you, but the company can recoup their costs and provide it to a physician who requests it on behalf of the patient.
mhm.
That's the federal right to try. But isn't it interesting that a spinal cord patient who is not considered terminal, so they can't get that same treatment, even though, for all intents and purposes, their life is dramatically reduced. So, what I'm super interested in and talking to HHS people that are now in power is how do we broaden that? And I think that's the way we responsibly go forward,
Mm.
because I have terrible concerns about this wild west of stem cells, which I've seen before in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely, hundred
And I
percent.
see it rearing
Yeah,
its head now with the Florida law, which we can talk
yeah. The
about.
Florida
But
laws that kind
but
of
there,
shocked
I mean,
the.
I see Instagram posts that are horrifying now, and every Billy Bob doctor, whatever, is advertising that they're doing stem cells again. And I can tell you with certainty that there are very few manufacturers in the United States that are even capable of producing GMP cells under, under with that meet the criteria of right to try. Very few. And I'm really concerned about the safety issue because here we've spent all these years, decades, and nobody's gotten hurt. What I'm really concerned about is somebody's going to get hurt because there's going to be
Some lab that's
some
not
some
above
lab,
board
some
or
pop
something
up
like
lab.
that. Yeah.
They're popping up everywhere. Pop up lab that doesn't do the controls. They don't do
Yeah.
the proper sterility testing. They don't do endotoxin testing. They have no controls whatsoever. I've visited some of them, and I can tell you there's some terrible, terrible examples. I'm concerned for the entire industry that we're going to have all these cowboys pop up again,
What puts a black mark on everybody,
which I
right?
see. I already see it in my Instagram. I'm watching. There's an ad for a guy for the next town over from me saying, "Yeah, we're doing." He has some athlete on there. Yeah, We did 80 million stem cells and 400 billion exosomes and blah 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 blah. I guarantee you, I know who he bought the product from. There are no stem cells in there, and maybe there's some
And
exosomes
this is in Texas.
in Texas, like right up the road, advertising on Instagram. So it's all coming back around because you have the Utah law. There's a Utah stem cell law. There's a Montana stem
Mm-hmm.
cell law. There's a Florida stem cell law. There are probably 7 stem cell laws that are in effect. Nevada. Then these people are popping up, and I'll tell you, I was an expert witness on 3 cases of people that were given infected product from one of these cowboy labs. It's just going to ruin. It's
But
going to
that,
set the whole industry back if we go down this road again. So I just want to caution that if somebody says they're doing stem cells, there are a few good questions to ask. Well, who manufactured them? Are they FDA inspected? Do they use CGMP? Do they provide a certificate of
mm,
analysis? Is there any third party who's evaluated their product? Are there live cells in there? How did they count the live cells? There are a lot of very inconvenient questions that most of these providers that are just willy-nilly advertising right now are not going to have the answers
but
to.
how? But so you know what I talk about this a lot. One of the things that bothers me A lot. And so the audience is like, everything bothers you. I get it. Everything bothers me. Yes, I'm always bothered. But one of the things that bothers me is just in general influencers out here because, I have a massive passion for integrative health and helping people and helping them restore their lives. And there are amazing tools out here and stem cells are way up there, in the tools that we have. And I just go through this series of stuff, like what's the economics behind, like, is somebody paying them to do it? And do they have expertise, whatever. But one of the big ones I always talk about is that the reason that I like physicians being influencers to their patients is because in my opinion, and this is where it's kind of shocking to hear some of the stuff you just said. In my opinion, we are scrutinized so much more by our boards. We have to be so careful. Like, for example, like we do like autologous stem cells, and they're fine. FDA is fine with that. It's 100% above board. We are certainly looking to see what's coming down the road a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. But as a physician, myself, Dr. Sager, that are, doing these autologous stem cells, if we were to bring in other products in a million years, I would never get behind something that is not ironclad safe. It just would never happen because I'm risking everything. That my partner would be, you're risking everything. So why? But it sounds like these guys are advertising stuff. They don't even know what they're advertising. They're just
Yeah,
like, it's
it's
crazy.
just a doctor who bought some product from a company which is under heavy FDA scrutiny right now
So he
for
knows he's not. Does he understand that
I don't
if
think he
something
does. I
goes
don't think
wrong,
he, I
they're
don't
not protect. You're not
I
protected.
don't think he understands that.
Like,
Yeah. I have a regenerative clinic, we use
yeah,
bone marrow, we,
yeah. You do.
I have these guys that come in, they want to talk to me because my name's on the building. And then they have no idea who I am. And they're pitching me all this stuff and they're making these claims.
That's
And
all. That's awesome.
I love giving them a lot of rope, just let
Yeah,
them
you sit
give
there,
me
listen
rope
to them.
and then get all their literature,
Yes.
and then drop the bomb on them
It is, listen, what it reminds me? You talk about the wild, wild west. Obviously, like you haven't spent, your whole life thinking about spine surgery or whatever, but there was a time like where these anterior cages came out,
hmm
right? And so for degenerative disc disease, I mean, like run of the mill degenerative disc disease, you have a little like signal in your disc or your disc a little low. Everybody was getting these spine fusions. Okay, so they called that time. There's a name for it. It's called cage rage,
Mm.
where these surgeons were going crazy just putting in the cages because, right, these reps were coming around saying everyone's just, it's great, there's nothing, and everyone's going to do great. Obviously a lot of people didn't do so well because the indications that's not how we practice. Now I think disc replacements are have made a major, like those are a lot better for stuff because you're preserving motion and stuff like that. But it kind of reminds me of that, where it's the Wild West. Just circling back, it sounds like some of these products, then you start getting other industries involved, and then they're not above board. Because I know we've talked about your lab and your safety and how you have to shut down to make sure because you're all
hmm
FDA compliant. So you saying are these other labs, do they not subject themselves to FDA compliance, or do they have to even bring these products out? I don't really know
I
how
don't.
that
I can
system
only think
works.
of four other labs besides ours that is as FDA inspected and it can
So you're
manufacture this.
telling me there's labs right now in the U.S. without naming them. I know you're like me. We don't. We're not going to point to any. But so you're saying there are labs that are making these things and selling product that are not even FDA inspected.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you don't, make sure that you know where you're sourcing your. I mean, this is really important stuff because you're going to put a black mark, right? The cage rage. I'm going to go back to the cage rage. So there's a cage rage, and there was a time, spine surgeons were doing a ton of fusions and whatever, and that's just the way that things were. I mean, just that's the way that the industry. But it did put a black mark because
hmm
if you go back and you start look, if you want to pull articles from pretty much every state, kind of bashing spine surgery and what people were doing with these multi-level fusions on, these people that, just had degenerative disc disease and were having 5-level fusion. It wasn't good for our profession. Obviously, it's easy for us to survive because there's so many horrific things that happen in the spine that people just
hmm
need surgery. So it's not like you can get rid of this. You need spine surgeons around. But I think with all these kind of fake, still ethical considerations, like, oh, this is like a scourge, like God's going to come down and the rain of fire is going to, because we're doing embryonic stuff. None of that's all nothing. But with all that kind of being in the background, obviously having something like this, and you have a couple disasters. We actually had that in Minnesota, where there was contaminated vials of product that were being used in injections, epidural steroids, and actually
Oh yeah,
a
the
good friend of
steroid thing
mine,
was.
a good friend of mine who's an orthopedic surgeon,
Mm-hmm.
got a contaminated vial.
Oh man.
He did not get sick. He never got sick, but it like for one, the guy was freaking out,
Oh, well,
as you can imagine.
yeah, that was a compounding pharmacy thing, and that changed everything
Yeah,
about compounding pharmacy.
yeah,
But this the 361 of we'll get into the weeds of how these things are
yeah.
regulated, and it goes to the point of the Yale study where if you just wanted to do that as a physician, you can't, right?
No,
Because the FDA considers that a new
right.
drug. This federal registry, it's a bunch of numbers you don't need to know, but one of the numbers, the 361, is an exemption. So, for example, tissue products, if you want to do a skin graft, it's exempt.
Right.
A lot of grafting stuff is exempt. Bone, like tendon transplants and
Mm,
things like that, they're exempt because they have the original structure and function of the thing. But MSCs, I mean, arguably taking these repair cells, which have the exact same structure and function in the donor as they will in the recipient, to me should be kind of minimally manipulated. It should be, homologous use. So there's two problems with the 361. The homologous use, it has to have the same
mm,
function it does in the donor as it does in the recipient. Well, FDA changed those rules. If you basically do anything to it, it's not exempt anymore. If it's used in a part of the body it's not taken from, it's not exempt.
mm.
So there were a lot of exemptions and people were taking advantage of that. And unfortunately, it just created more and more restriction on what was exempt and what wasn't. So it takes, back in the day, if you were using your patient's cells and growing them and giving them back to that patient, or even to a
Hmm.
first or second blood relative, who cares, right? You're a doctor, you're practicing medicine. That was a deal.
Off-label use. I mean, off-label use
Well,
yeah.
there's just no way you can do that now. I
No,
mean,
nope.
your medical board, probably your malpractice insurance wouldn't let you do it because it's not, you know what I mean? They would say you're not covered if you're going to do this, right? So I would caution physicians, if you're going to do something without at least a minimum IRB, institutional review board, which is an ethics
Right,
committee,
right, right, right.
I would highly recommend you don't do that
No,
because
they should not do that. We had a couple physicians, in our area back at this. We're talking a decade ago, who made the front cover
oh really
for doing some stuff. And like I said, as a physician myself, and we do autologous stem cells, it's like we would never even consider. Like it's not even on the. It's not. You just can't. You don't do that. So that's why I don't understand. I'm like, unfortunately, we're in the U.S. We don't do it. I mean, you're one of the foremost leaders in this industry. You don't do it. You don't do the things that you can't do in the U.S. Period. Period. You just don't. You do them in
no
Panama
I'm
because
I'm,
you can't do them.
I'm working
Panama laws are different than U.S. laws, so you do what you do in Panama, which is fine, right? Because it's perfectly legal in Panama.
right. Well, we're hoping things change around
That's
here, and we're
yes.
doing a lot of talking with HHS people, and there's the FDA is supposed to have their first swing at major changes here in a couple of weeks, and we'll see what comes out of it. But one of the things we proposed is have an industry group. So they said to me,
Mm,
well, hey, can you get an industry group around here? Can you get us some patients? Can you get us celebrities that will come and do a roundtable with us in Washington on MSCs? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I got them three sets. Academia.
mm.
I got industry leaders, and I got patients. I gave them three buckets of people. I'm waiting. I'm not even sure we're going to get a roundtable because it seems like things are moving so fast.
It's wonderful.
So we'll see what happens. But what we proposed was taking the right to try law, which is already on the
Yes.
books, and kind of marrying that with the Japanese regenerative medicine law that went into effect in 2015, which has led to so much innovation, so much iteration, so much ingenuity, because you don't have to spend 30 or 40 million dollars for even a small phase 2 study. You do a phase 1 study, which depending on what
Mm,
indication can
mm.
cost, 8 million to 20 million or something, You do a phase 1 study, demonstrate your product is safe,
Hmm.
and then the government will make that determination. And then once they deem it safe, then you're able to market that product for 7 years.
Mm.
And then at the end of 7 years, you need to present your efficacy data. But the whole time, there's a registry of every single patient that you're doing. So our right to try law does not require a registry. So they have no idea how your patients are doing. Whereas if you marry the Japanese law
I
with
think that's
it,
brilliant.
then
Yeah.
you're going to have this chronic registry that has open eyes and ears at the agency that can look at it any time. And I think that's the ethical and responsible way to do something that would provide much broader application to many more patients. With using the spinal cord injury as an example, they can't qualify under right to try. But if you had some scenario where you married the Japanese law with our right to try law, followed everybody in a registry, made sure that only manufacturers that are FDA inspected
100%.
have
Yes.
have done
Yes.
phase 1 clinical trials, are doing the manufacturing, then I think you have a responsible, safe way of going forward.
I mean, it's a good regulatory, that's a good regulatory framework. Right now, everyone's obsessed with regulatory frameworks for crypto, which
Mm-hmm.
they've obviously been able to
Yeah.
to really push forward with the Genius Act and all these other things. But we definitely need a safe regulatory framework for this. But again, like clinics like yours, in Panama that have demonstrated it, and I just want people to understand, not 1,000 patients, tens of thousands of patients who have been safely treated. And so my concern, and again, I brought it up before, I mean, I have several, friends that have multiple sclerosis.
Mm-hmm.
And they've really struggled despite the fact that they've been, different iterations of medications. I have a really good childhood friend. I don't see him as much. He lives, back home. But the last time I saw him, I mean, he can hardly walk at this point, and he just started back when we went to college together. It's very sad to see that. So, I would love, and that family doesn't necessarily have the means to come down to because they've struggled. They've had to deal with his illness and all this other stuff. But love for to say, oh yeah, there's this clinic. Yeah, just go up to White Plains, New York. There's this great stem cell clinic there.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing great work, and I think they can really help you. I think it's really unfair to people given the amount of data that's out there, especially when you're there. People have to think of themselves when you're having these roundtable. If you think about it, they need to put themselves in the shoes. I was like, do you know what it's like to have multiple sclerosis or be in pain constantly from rheumatoid arthritis, to be on these drugs they're basically, it's basically chemotherapy is what it is. I mean, that's the like the lay term, to use for it. I mean, they're just pumped full of all these drugs, which then cause other side effects and things like that. The downside to using these systemic stem cell therapies, and whether it's replicating, autologous cell lines or using the day zero cells or whatever, it's really unfair to a lot of people. I mean, it really, I mean, do you have any, I mean, would you disagree? I mean, it's very unfair to people that are suffering. Now, I get it. If they're going to start getting unregulated products from everywhere, then it's going to cause a big problem. But if we can have a framework to really treat a lot of these people, not to mention from a government standpoint, there are so many sick people in CMS, right? Medicare, Medicaid. Do you know how much money they would save if they just brought in some of these integrative health strategies to their patients? Stem cells, peptides, photobiomodulation, all these things that we have. It would drop the cost of health. It would be ridiculous. The
Can I
savings,
give you an example of
ridiculous.
one condition?
Please.
So there was a clinical study done of type 2 diabetics, and it was double blind, placebo controlled, gold standard, and the treatment group received essentially 120 million IV MSCs umbilical cord, and the control received saline, and there was no other intervention, and they followed them for 3 years.
Just one dose,
One treatment
one
cycle.
treatment. Okay,
Yeah, I think there were 2 doses.
two
But
doses, one
yeah,
treatment. So I got you.
and then and they followed them for 3 years. They had monthly data every month, and their hemoglobin A1C, the treated group. I mean, the they're relatively well controlled diabetics, right? So they're both groups were type 2 diabetic, and roughly the same amount of, they had the disease for similar
And
amount of
same
time.
amount of dysfunction and
BMI
numbers.
roughly similar and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But their hemoglobin A1C was 7, which wasn't bad, But or it was 7.5. Yeah, it was 7.5, the mean. Okay, and then so that's basically a snapshot of your blood sugar for the
So they
last
were already
3
being
months.
controlled with orals and
Yeah. So
that
orals
stuff.
and
Yeah.
insulin. So
So they were doing pretty. I mean,
they were
that's
basically
pretty good.
standard of
Yeah,
care,
yeah, yeah.
and they were randomized based on a lottery.
Yeah.
And then the treatment group dropped by 1.5 points. So they went from being a diabetic hemoglobin A1C to a non-diabetic hemoglobin A1C.
What time frame?
At 3 months, they had a 1.5, and that control lasted for 18 to 21 months, depending on if you're looking at after a meal blood sugar, and there are a bunch of different markers that they were looking at. But they had roughly an 18-month vacation from being diabetic, and then they started creeping back
Were they
up.
able to come off of their meds? I
A
have to
lot
look
of them
at that
were,
study.
yeah. So
I don't know the study.
I can't remember the exact numbers, but the insulin use in the treatment group dropped by 80 to 90%. And of course, it didn't drop at all in the control group. So some of them were on insulin, some of them came off insulin, but just the total cost of insulin was reduced by 80 or 90% in the treatment group. And they enjoyed all this wonderful health for
And
about
probably the
18, 20 months.
long-term cost of care is huge, right? Because then they get another. I'm sure they could get another cycle of treatment and then just keep.
Yeah, I
keep them
think for
there.
a type 2 diabetic, once
Yeah.
every 18
Yeah.
months sounds reasonable, every 15 months or something. And then what are all the comorbidities? Kidney disease, heart disease, retinal disease,
I mean, you're saying
peripheral vascular disease.
millions of dollars per person in the more severe cases. Some of these diabetics, I mean,
Right, and they're either going to die or they're going to become more
Yep.
severe, right? So until you can reverse it, I haven't even put numbers to it, but it's an enormous number. It's an enormous number that have type 2 diabetes, enormous amount of savings of just drug product of insulin, for example.
I'm going to throw it on there again, just thinking, let me put my integrative hat on. Everyone takes these different factions, right? There's the people like, oh, everyone should be on a GLP-1, and then there's the other people, oh my God, but if you do the right diets and you do intermittent fasting or vegan or whatever, you can drop people from being diabetics to being non-diabetics. This is true, but this is not the way our society functions. It's a very difficult thing to do. Yes, I preach all this stuff too, but I go back and forth, and I think it's fine. But what I do know, and why I do like the GLP-1s in a way, and I've come around to it because I'm a big diet and exercise guy. Like for my patients, I really preach it. But it's hard for people. It's hard in our society. It's hard when you're constantly looking at your phone and you're not you're sedentary and you haven't gone to the gym for 30 years. It's hard for me to it's hard to lecture them to completely change their life. So these are more like it's more of an easy button. However, you could potentially even save even more money to the system because they may not even have to do it again, because once you feel better, because when you get these cells, it's funny, on your Joe Rogan episode, he was saying his friend got it. He felt like he was like this, like lightning bolts coming out of his hand. He felt so energized. He felt like a superhero. But anyway, not only are you reducing their A1C, but I bet you they also felt great. So they're more likely then to get into an intermittent fasting lifestyle or change their diet, more likely to get into the gym, more likely for all their markers to get better. And they may even need another, I'd have to look at the study. I don't exactly know what how it all worked out. But if we could just stop this process, from going on, because obviously a couple cycles of intravenous stem cells is nothing.
Right.
And it can be revolutionary. If I'm sitting across from you at these tapes. Now, not me, even the previously biased physician that I threw away. I came out. I threw that guy away. We don't talk to him anymore. Even that guy would have listened to this and said, "Wait a minute, you're telling me that you can give people a couple rounds of these things and then they're okay and then have to be on the." Why would I be against that? Like, what do they say to you when they're on the other side of the table? Like, what are the counter arguments? It's too good to be true. I don't believe you. Well, here's the data, but I don't believe you. Is what they're saying.
It's not even my study, but it was a very well done.
No, I know it's not your study, but I'm like, when you show them all these things, they're like, well, this is great, but I don't believe it.
Yeah, I wasn't taught this in medical school.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think that's going to change pretty soon. I mean, I think you're going to see some changes to medical school. I mean, look, you spent all that money, you spent all that time, you worked your ass off, and you were taught things, and now you've internalized those things, and the things that are on the test are now golden in your mind, and you know them, and non-doctors don't. So, and I think until it becomes a test question, it's just gonna be really hard for people to grasp it. But the next generation, I think, people like you who've turned the corner, have seen results outside of what you were taught in medical school. I think those you people are going to change it.
No, I hope so.
And like,
My son is, and of course, hopefully, he continues to go down the path, but he's a freshman and he just started and he's pre-med. He really wants to go into this field. And I just said, take it easy on them on the light therapy and the photobiomodulation, all
yeah,
that stuff. And the
don't
stems.
mention any
I
of
was
that.
like, don't start that on the first day because they're all going to think that you're some goofball. Is, oh, here we go, with this guy because he's actually worked at our clinics and he's like very well versed on this stuff. It's just, I was like, just take it easy if you go, to do an internship next summer. Don't start spewing all this stuff because you're not gonna they're not gonna understand what you're saying. You're gonna threaten people, and they're gonna be pretty shocked. Multiple sclerosis. Just going back to that. Do you have a good example? Like just I know the studies are really strong. The things that you guys have presented and whatever. Could you give us an example of a really tough case that you
Mhm.
had in MS? Because there's a lot, I mean, MS is huge. There's all these like, there's so many chat groups and so many others. MS is a very common, disease in our country, especially in the northern, kind of northern part of the country. I mean, do you feel like it's something that should be a first line for MS?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
And
That's it. We
look,
just we cut right through.
there's no downside, and we have drugs that block T cells from entering the brain, and you could die of encephalitis, of viral encephalitis, and that's okay. But here you have
Oh,
a drug.
they love that stuff. That stuff gets some those. I
Those are
love
big
that. They
numbers.
approve those things.
Those are big numbers. I think early on, and that's where we see the best results early on. So the body has this really potent capacity to remyelinate or put insulation back on
Right.
nerves, and in MS it's no different. So you have MS patients, and that relapsing remitting period is where the immune system is
Hmm.
attacking the insulation and part of the brain, and then the remitting part is when they remyelinate because they're able to remyelinate. So you have these lesions that come and go
Hmm.
all the time. If you have serial MRIs on MS patients during that phase, you'll see them coming and going and coming and going. And then secondary progressive is when they don't remit anymore. So now a lesion forms and it's there forever because the capacity to fix the insulation
Hmm.
is, everybody's retired. All the insulation fixers are done. They've gone home. So that's secondary progressive. So if you get patients within 5 years and they're in that relapsing remitting, that's where you get the biggest benefit. But we've had people with secondary progressive that are in really bad shape. There's a lady from New Jersey who came to see us many years ago, and uh, one of the doctors accepted her, and I normally would not. Like, I was not very happy when this lady
Because she
showed
was
him.
so far down the road.
She was literally on a hospital bed, and they pulled up, and I said, "Bro, we're not treating her here. You need to get a hospital. You need to get her to a facility that can handle her because we're an outpatient clinic. We don't do that sort of thing." And he's just a very empathetic guy and really wanted to help her. And so he did. He took her to the hospital and they treated her for a while over there. She started improving. They took her to one of these a lot of cosmetic surgery places, so they have 24-hour nursing and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. Continue to treat her, and he goes back. She goes back home, and she's walking.
It's
And the
amazing.
doctor calls me and he said, "Man, I'd like to know what you gave that lady." And I told him, I said, "We just gave her umbilical cord stem cells IV, the doctor did." And he said, "Well, all my, 30 years of practice, I've never seen anything like it." And he said, "I was going to call you a quack, but I think you did a really good job." And I said, "Well, I was going to call you a quack because you've treated for 20."
That's great. I love it.
But
I
we
love
actually
that.
joked about it
That's
at the
right.
end. But
That's
there when you see, you can't unsee.
now is he referring you patients?
Oh gosh, that was so long ago.
Because
I don't
I- you
remember
know,
the guy's name, but yeah.
sorry to
But that happens a lot. We get a
yeah.
non-believer
And
who
then they
then
switch,
sees it, and then they're like, well, here, go down to Panama. You know, we see, we get a lot of that.
unless it's competing with their own business.
Well, that probably would be a disincentive for them. Yeah, for
Bingo.
sure.
It's just the true stuff. Yeah. So
Well, doctors hate to lose patients, and then that's one of the
it's a
things.
fear, but a lot of times it's a fear. Right now, oh my, there are so many patients out there.
That
They're just
we have so many doctors that refer to us. They come to us. They're patients themselves,
they're patients
and they're a part
themselves.
of the deal. We don't exclude them. We don't say, "Hey, well, whatever with that doctor." We're just like, "Yeah, we love her. We love him," and we report to them. Our
Yep.
doctors will report to them saying, "This is what we did," and and they're part of the whole journey, right? Instead of typically in the U.S. you refer somebody out, you never see them again,
Right.
right? I mean, you're done and your job's over. But these are mostly concierge physicians who are taking care of high net worth people, and they have a real close relationship with them. And our goal is not to you know cut them off. Our goal is to work with them
Of course.
on the patients getting better.
And educate, and educate them. I mean, some of my, it's interesting because not necessarily stems, because again, we do musculoskeletal stuff and autologous stem cells, and people generally understand some of that stuff, especially our referring providers and things like that. But with some of the other stuff that we've done with some of the integrative health stuff, it's funny because some of these patients have done they're uh, amazing,
Mm-hmm.
and they go back to their docs, and even that is not enough to convince them, and they just say, I had one woman that we treated, who was very unwell, and we did all this, like, photobiomodulation, oxygen therapy. We did all kinds of stuff with this lady, and she did amazing. She went back to the doc, and the doc's like, she's like, what happened to you? You feel you done? She's like, I've never felt better. She's like, I haven't felt like this since I was 20 years old.
Mm.
And so she was expecting the doc was going to be like, oh my God, what clinic is it? I'm going to refer all my patients there. You know, the doc said? She's like, enjoy your placebo effect. I hope it holds. There's nothing more frustrating when people see the results. It's literally in front of them. It's in front of you. See it. This person was sick. Now they're not sick. And you can't even like it. That's how siloed we become sometimes as providers. It's right there. You have done an amazing job of pumping out research studies, which is great because it helps people like me really like to say, okay, I'm a physician. I can put my, I can really support this stuff, and it really, helped me to open my mind to even just doing autologous stem cells, and musculoskeletal, because there is a fear. Number one, you don't want your colleagues to be like, oh, that's the guy that, oh, now he's doing that regenerative stuff. That's kind of weird. That's not ethical. Is his practice going, badly? Or is he trying to leave medicine, or, something like that? But it's just, it's kind of, we're so siloed, we see it, but we always say it with things that are safe. So for example, your patient, the spinal cord patient, or your patient that had the MS, if those were my patients and I sent them to you, I sent you 4 of those patients and you send them back, I don't need a study. If I sent you 4 spinal cord injuries and they all come back and they have improved function,
Mm-hmm.
and I've already followed them for a year, but now they've improved after a year, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll send you everybody. It's done. It's a done deal. But that's not really the way it works, because that's how powerful the brainwashing is it, and it's just immense, and we have to just overcome that. And I'm sure that you've heard in your years of doing this thing, and you're really good at it. You're like, I don't really care what people say, but I'm sure you've heard horrible things
Mm.
said about. What's the
Oh,
worst thing? What's the worst thing that you've ever heard said about you directly, or your clinic?
well, I think the worst and kind of funniest thing was, I also did a lot of pioneering work on intravenous vitamin
The
C
vitamin
for
C.
cancer patients. So there was somebody that was targeting me, right? And they said, this video that went viral. So that really pissed off somebody,
Of course.
right? That this video is going viral. And so they wrote on Reddit that I went to Riordan's clinic and he gave me vitamin C. First of all, I don't treat anybody. We have medical doctors that do that. And he gave me vitamin C. Then he gave me stem cells. and my right testicle fell off. But it was like, very, he just went on and on and on.
Is
And,
this good?
and I was just like, we better shut off the comments on that. It's not working so well. But I've been attacked by many people, many smart people and many dumb people. And it doesn't really matter because I know that we're helping people and these cells don't hurt anybody. And that's all that really matters. My father was an innovator in medicine, and he had balls. I couldn't be as ballsy as him. I mean, he was doing stuff that was off the beaten track in the 1960s. So you had to there was a cabal then. You think there's a cabal now? Well, you couldn't stray too far from exactly what everybody else was doing back in the day. So, and he just didn't care, and I don't care.
Obviously, you got a lot of that from.
I
Obviously, you got a lot of that from him. So you
right.
went into everything you did with an open mind. You didn't get brainwashed as much as like
Yeah,
I
yeah, and
did, for example.
a
Yeah.
lot of doctors are deadly afraid of somebody looking at them askew and thinking they're doing something, different. But it's, if you have the results, man, just like you, I'm sure you see the results, so you don't,
But
you
again,
don't,
what we're doing in our like listen, I get so what we are doing in our clinic. I'm not even talking about the stem cells because honestly, because we're doing autologous stem cells, and it's also with a guy he's a very renowned injection guy. He's been in town forever, so he's very trusted, and so people are like, oh, they're just they're taking care of arthritis and tendon injuries and stuff. So is to be honest with you, I get more pushback with a lot of the like the light therapies and the other stuff and laser, this class 4 laser therapy, which honestly on the coast is actually becoming a pretty big deal. Like foot and ankle surgeons use class 4 laser therapy very routinely here in California. I actually know a bunch of foot and ankle surgeons here. They use it on all their patients. It's amazing.
Right.
But I could tell you, it's funny. You talk about pushback and the dumbest stuff. Like there's always somebody that wants to attack you for something. I did a post. This is a true. This is crazy because I had to like do all this like PR, stuff about it. So I did a post. It was the most basic post, and it just talked about how excited I was about the results that I was seeing in my patients that were opioid dependent, that we were then treating with like things like class 4 laser therapy, that because we need, and I made a big deal. I was like, we absolutely, especially with all the issues that we have in our country, we need opioid free solutions. It's just so much better for them because I see what happens, to these people when this happens. I was viciously attacked. I mean, this lady, she kept trolling me. She was making videos about me, and then her followers were making video. Like they were like, and some of them were like high as a kite while they were making like these videos about me. And then they were just saying, "Oh, he's the opioid spirit." So then they started saying that I do spine surgery without anesthesia.
Oh,
Because I'm
of
so
course.
anti-opioid that do not go to this spine surgeon because he does not believe in opioids. He will do your surgery with no anesthesia, no opioids, and then he won't give you anything. And I'm like, I do scoliosis surgery and like 12 level fusions. I use opioids quite a bit for these people. But anyway, I had to do videos. You talk about shutting off the comments because all her people were coming in. It was like crazy. It was the craziest thing. And that's what you're going to get. And there's always there's always going to be a negative. I could talk about intermittent fasting and somebody gets on there and is so upset. I did one post about, these are the dumbest stuff too. I mean, I did a post about talking about how our ingredients here in the United States are different than they are and some
Oh,
like
I would
a
imagine.
doctor got on. He was so angry. So are you saying I'm never supposed to? And he kept on. He was on. We got into a bit. And my social media person said, stop responding to him. I couldn't help it. I'm like, you're attacking me, and I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to help people. I'm talking about food ingredients for God's sake. So anyway, I that's a great story. His testicle fell off because you gave him high dose It's interesting on the
Yeah.
vitamin C thing, which I've read a lot. Obviously, that's off topic, on for purposes of this podcast. But on the vitamin C issue on cancer, it's interesting how that's another voodoo kind of topic still in the United States. I mean, we do an entire show on that. I mean, I know a physician, pretty well that does some of these, very much believes in vitamin C. He's a concierge guy. He does it off the beaten path, but he's, referred people. But I've seen a lot of people that have gone to Mexico to have some of those, cancer treatments. A lot of my patients, I don't refer them there because I don't know
There's
those
something
centers. I don't know
more.
anything about it.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but I know that they've gone there and they've told me what their results are. And I mean, I see what I see. Again, not medical advice. I see what I see, and they've been pretty happy with some of it. And again, that doesn't mean they're not getting traditional care too. Some of them they're
Mhm.
mixing it or whatever. But I think people just need to be given, options. I'm really looking forward to seeing if you can just finally just crack that ceiling and open it up safely
Right. Right.
in the US, and you're the guy to do it, which is why I was so excited to have you on the podcast. I mean, you're really the guy to do it. Could you envision? Because, like I said, my partner, he's like Mr. Stem Cell. He loves stem cells. All he wants to talk about is stem cells. Like sometimes I have to kind of walk away. I'm like, I get it, man. I get it. But do you envision this in the next 1 to 2 years? Or
I think it's either going to happen in the next 1.5 years or it's not going to happen. That's what I
well,
think.
hopefully
I think it's a
I
binary thing because if
oh,
the political environment right now, you have a HHS secretary, you have an FDA commissioner, both of whom are very much in favor of
yeah,
responsibly
yeah.
getting healing tools to as much of the population as possible. I've never seen that in my entire medical career. Or scientific career, I've never seen a U.S. government le- leadership that's so excited about helping people, making people better.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I always try to stay, out of the political because obviously, I treat from all, but I'm not just like the goal is to push things forward.
Hmm.
So when there is an opportunity to push something forward that is good for humanity, we all just have to align. It doesn't matter what letter they have after their name. That's all. It's a bunch of. I was down in DC a couple. I was talking to both sides of the aisle. It's just so much nonsense, mumbo jumbo
Hmm.
garbage. They're so mired in hating each other and politics. I'm just like, we're here to promote. We're trying to push, neurosurgical techniques and orthopedic surgery and integrative health and all this stuff. I don't care about your squabbles and your little committees that you
Hmm.
have that have nothing to do with helping anybody. I hope you're right. We need it. If we want to be at the forefront of it. I mean, I would love for us to be the Minnesota kind of northern center doing this, helping people because there's again millions of people in the in the U.S. Just to kind of wrap this up because we didn't talk. I wanted to get more into kind of like some of these musculoskeletal. It's interesting because it's so powerful for musculoskeletal conditions. I'm talking just even autologous cells. And yeah, as the patients get older, it might not be as effective all the time. But it was fun because even on like your appearances, there's always somebody like even when you were on the Joe Rogan show, everyone has to start chiming in how their buddy got it for their shoulder or for their
Uh-huh.
ankle or for their knee. I I don't think that people understand for MSK, musculoskeletal,
Uh-huh.
for spine, for tendons, for these kinds of things. This is real stuff. I mean, people can legitimately avoid surgery. There's this study that French guy did. I think what was his name? Hernigu.
Hernigue.
Yeah, Hernigu.
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, he did a couple, the big
He
ones,
did.
and I quote him all the time.
Yeah, he did shoulders and knees, and that shoulder one. Basically, if you got greater, he had the resurge rate was 0 at 5 years. Was it 5 years, and then 10 years, and then at 10 years, the resurge rate. Do you remember the
The
exact
shoulders,
numbers?
I don't remember, but I know the knee numbers
Oh, okay.
like
What
the
are the knee
like the back of
numbers?
my hand. So the knee numbers were great. So he did 60 patients,
Mm-hmm.
both horrible knees. So he did intra-articular on one side, BMAC,
Mm-hmm.
and then he did intraosseous on the other side. At
Mm-hmm.
15 years later, not 1.5, 15 years later, in the intra-articular only group, which is why we just use it adjunct, 70% of the people needed a total knee. Only 20%
Of the interosseous.
20% of the intraosseous. And they replicated that. It was a much bigger study. Then they did the total knee on one side and this other study. And then they did the intraosseous injections on the other. So it was 18% at 15 years got total knees on one side. It was 1.1% per year. Most of them happen at least 10 years out when they had total knees. On the knee side, 1% of them needed to have something done that they had already had, like, and then it got even more. It was interesting. It was even better on the side of the intraosseous than it was with the total knee replacement, because obviously those are become older total knee replacements, and then you can have other things happen. But that, it's so powerful. So a lot of people say, like I saw one study, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but there was one guy out, and obviously he's promoting PRP. It didn't annoy me. I'm just like, but you're forgetting a whole other technique just because you need a certain skill level to do that technique. This guy's a lot of followers. Again, I don't know how to name names, but he's like, oh, okay, this PRP, like they had that study, that meta-analysis, PRP intra-articular versus BMAC intra-articular, and they found no difference. I'm like, you're comparing completely the wrong thing. And he's like, well, come get PRP because this is more expensive.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, it's more expensive. But if you get only 18% of people having a total knee 15 years later and you do it intraosseous, it's worth a lot more than this other one.
Absolutely.
But it's worth everything because these people aren't avoiding knee replacement. These people are. So you're comparing the wrong thing. So of course I wrote my wrong. But I'm sure you guys are seeing the same things. And I know how much of a proponent you are about the day zero. So I'm 1,000% sold on systemic. I think it's amazing, and I think it's going to be great. Using them anywhere.
Well, I think MSCs. Allo MSCs or donor MSCs, what we're talking about, are going to work great on the interosseous. And I don't.
Of course,
there's a little bit of data on it, but the Hernigue shoulder study.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember the exact numbers on that one.
The minutia on that is the important minutia is he measured the MSCs in the BMAC. So that's bone marrow aspirate concentrate, and there are MSCs in there. And if it was above a certain level, the research rate was much lower than if it was below a certain level. So there was no BMAC was the highest research level. BMAC with fewer MSCs was
because of the
lower,
because
better,
of the patient selection. Yes,
if they had a rich MSC concentration, it was very, very low.
Which is us. I was just saying, like,
so even if you did BMAC and enhanced it with allo stuff to get the numbers up to Hernigue's level, then I think you would get at least that or better.
I think it's amazing. Is like just that as we wrap up, I can just tell you we've got two, we have two patients in our practice that the reason that they're whatever is because as an orthopedic surgeon, when I see their knees, I don't do knee replacements. But as a spine surgeon, I want to do knee replacements. That's how bad. I mean, they're horrible. And these patients are older. And they had BMAC and they had the intraosseous. He does them everywhere. He puts them, on both sides of the joint, and then he'll do like just all the ligaments. He does everything. And both of them are, I don't know, 6 months out. One's probably a year out. They have no pain, zero. So it's really, really powerful stuff. Now, enhancing them with other cells probably will extend it, or even better. I mean, I'm just we're giving anecdotal, but generally it's really, really powerful. I mean, the data is good in knees. No one's going to dispute that, but doing it intraosseous is so much better. Last thing, hips. One of the critics, people are like, oh, this stuff doesn't work as well in hips. Yes, because you're putting it intra-articular, and there's not a lot of, there's very little literature looking at intraosseous injections in the hips, doing the subchondral injections, and that's something that we're doing. So it'd be interesting to follow these patients, follow a series of 10 or 20 patients and see how they do. But I'm positive they're going to do way better. Same thing with shoulder. You want to get intraosseous injections, and very few people, are doing them. I know we talked about like doing the whole spine thing. So pretty exciting. And I know you treated, Mel Gibson, his dad, right? You did the hip. It was a miracle, right? The guy was running around. He's in his 90s. And he was still fine when he was 100. He went to his 100th birthday party and all that.
He was moonwalking, yeah.
Moonwalking. It's just fascinating. So we'll have to wrap it up. I mean, this has been an incredible show. I think we have to do it again, but I think next time it's got to be in Panama. because I think we need to. I want to walk the floors and just see.
Yeah,
Like,
let's do it,
I
man.
think it would be a
Come
like.
to Dallas and see our manufacturing
We could do
facility.
that. We could
Yeah.
just do a little hop, skip, and a jump. Go Dallas, maybe do
Yeah, yeah.
Panama, and just put it all together. We could do an entire series on this stuff. But it is the future, and again, I think the betting markets say that this kind of whole entire thing is going to be a huge part of just regular old medicine. I think it's going to be coming around. I think it's going to be taught in medical schools, and I think you're a big part of why we are where we are now. So, got to give credit where credit is due. So,
Thank you, brother.
um, that I think it's amazing. So I look forward to, to continuing this conversation and, going from there and just helping people. Because I know all you want to do is help people. All we want to do is help people. And we just all got to kind of stick together and just
Yeah.
kind of try to push these things that can help the world. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this and stayed till the end on this one, because there's a lot of information on here, a lot of action-packed information on this episode. How can they find you? How can they find your clinic if they either want to come down to Texas
Our
or
main
come to
website
Panama?
is cell medicine.com. And they can find me there, or our Dallas is RMI Clinic,
Okay,
Reardon Medical Institute, rmiclinic.com, but cellmedicine.com is kind of, you can get anywhere from there.
that's awesome. And you guys and your clinics, if people are interested, they can go through there and get and like just figure out like who to call to get the
Oh yeah,
information
there'll be all
and
the
all
information
that
on there.
stuff. And
Just it's a relatively short application, and then somebody will call them back pretty soon.
well, that's awesome. Just making you know what? Americans need the easy button. If you make it hard, they ain't doing it. This is complicated enough. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on Wellness at the Speed of Light. It has been a tremendous honor for me to do this. And think regenerative. Think your body can heal itself. We've got all these tools in here. And if we can just stimulate the body in the correct way, we can just make such a huge impact on global health and health and well-being in general, and just have a better society. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us.